Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, August 19, 2025. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu says that Boston will not comply with the ultimatum from U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi to give up its sanctuary city policies on immigration, saying this has always been a city of revolution, of innovation, of standing up for the public good and never bowing down to tyranny. California's House and Senate begin work on a new congressional district map to favor Democrats, designed to balance Republicans in Texas, rewriting U.S. House seat lines there to favor Republicans. President Donald Trump says there will be no U.S. troops in Ukraine as part of any security guarantees connected to a peace agreement with Russia. And Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick confirms that Intel must give the U.S. government equity in the company in exchange for billions of dollars in grants from the CHIPS Act to build semiconductor manufacturing facilities in the U.S. That and more coming up on Washington Today. A story at Boston.com. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu delivered a sharp rebuke to Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Trump administration Tuesday, threatening legal action and defying Bondi's request that the city abandon its sanctuary policies. Wu said at a press conference outside City Hall, silence in the face of oppression is not an option. She was joined by Senator Ed Markey, most members of the city council, state lawmakers, police officers, activists, union members, and leaders from nearby communities. That was from Boston.com. Here's Mayor Michelle Wu, a Democrat.
We're here again today because last week, Boston received a letter from the Attorney General of the United States on official letterhead from the federal government threatening to prosecute city officials and withhold federal funds unless we cooperate with carrying out mass deportations. At a time when this federal administration is already causing so much fear and harm in our communities, these threats are serious and consequential. But our same communities have told me, loud and clear, that silence in the face of oppression is not an option. The U.S. Attorney General asked for a response by today. So here it is. Here is our response. Stop attacking our cities to hide your administration's failures. Unlike the Trump administration, Boston follows the law. And Boston will not back down from who we are and what we stand for.
We will not!
We will not back away from our community that has made us the safest major city in the country and a leading example of why cities around the country make this country safer, healthier, and more prosperous for all Americans. To all the federal officials attacking communities that embody diversity, creativity, and moral clarity, we mayors said this in D.C. nearly 6 months ago, and I'll say it again today. You are wrong on the law, and you are wrong on safety. Most of all, you are wrong on cities. The cities that live in your minds are totally foreign to the residents living in our cities. And we are picking up the pieces of your failures to deliver on your promises. Under the Trump administration, groceries are less affordable. Housing is harder to build. Cures for cancer are farther away. And good news on our economy has been as hard to find as the Epstein list.
Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, a Democrat, at a rally and news conference today outside City Hall in her city. She is running for re-election this year. CBS News writes the U.S. Department of Justice sent letters to several so-called sanctuary jurisdictions on August 13th, notifying them, quote, of their unlawful sanctuary status and potential violations of federal law for allegedly interfering with federal immigration enforcement. The letter from Attorney General Pam Bondi, addressed directly to Wu, demanded a response by August 19th that, again, quote, confirms your commitment to complying with federal law and identifies the immediate initiatives you are taking to eliminate laws, policies, and practices that impede immigration enforcement. The article says that one of those policies is Boston's Trust Act, which limits the role of the city in enforcing federal immigration laws. Reporting from CBS News, Attorney General Pam Bondi was interviewed on Fox Business Monday about what happens if a city or state refuses the Justice Department's demands.
You've said sanctuary jurisdictions should not receive federal funds if they do not cooperate with ICE, and you are not reluctant to enforce that. Tell us more about that, because that, in some sense, is a big part of the criminal problem.
It sure is, and they had sanctuary policies here in D.C. No longer. They've been working with us. You have to tell us if there are illegal aliens in your database. If we're arresting someone, we are going to know if they're an illegal alien. So last week I sent out 32 letters to mayors around the country, and I believe to 7 governors, telling them you better comply or you're next. If they don't comply with this, Larry, we're going to work with our other agencies to cut off their federal funding. We are going to send in law enforcement, just like we did during the LA riots, just like we're doing here in Washington, D.C. And if they're not going to keep their citizens safe, Donald Trump will keep them safe. That's what this is all about, making America safe again. That was his only directive, and that's what we're doing.
Attorney General, so I'm just reading. On this sanctuary city, you sent notes out, 12 states, 10 major cities, New York City, Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Philadelphia, major cities. We fret about that a lot here in New York City. Are they complying? I mean, how is this working?
Some are, some are not. We've already sued New York. We've already sued Illinois. And if they don't comply, we're going to sue them. We're going to take away your federal funding. You're going to have to comply. We're going to send in law enforcement. If you're not going to do your job, we're going to do it for you to keep our citizens safe.
Attorney General Pam Bondi on Fox Business on Monday. 21 Democratic state attorneys general filed a lawsuit on Monday seeking to stop the Justice Department from withholding federal funds under the Victims of Crime Act to states whose officials refuse to comply with federal civil immigration enforcement. They say over $1 billion is at stake. Story from Time Magazine, more than 6,000 student visas have been revoked by the State Department since January. As the Trump administration cracks down on international students and other immigrants to the U.S., the agency says around 2/3 of the student visas have been canceled due to overstays and other alleged law violations, including assault, DUI, and burglary, according to a State Department spokesperson. Roughly 200 to 300, they said, were revoked for support of terrorism under the Immigration and Nationality Act. Louisiana Illuminator says that Governor Jeff Landry has approved sending 135 members of the Louisiana National Guard to Washington, D.C. in support of President Donald Trump's takeover of the city's police department. More than 1,000 National Guard soldiers from multiple states have been directed to the nation's capital since President Trump declared a crime emergency there, despite its violent crime rate reaching a 30-year low. That's reporting from the Louisiana Illuminator. Announcement from the Justice Department on Monday that there's going to be a co-deputy director at the FBI came up today at the White House briefing with the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt.
Can you walk us through why another deputy FBI director was named? Does Trump have any displeasure with how the FBI has been being run to date? And then I have a question about the antitrust.
No, Andrew Bailey is extremely qualified. As you know, he's been serving with honor as the Attorney General of Missouri, and he's been brought on as another set of very credible and experienced hands to work alongside the current Deputy Director, Dan Bongino, under the leadership of the Director, Kash Patel, and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. And the FBI has been doing a tremendous job. We've seen their agents out on the streets as part of this interagency task force here in Washington. But the crime that they've been stopping here in Washington, they've been doing this for 7 months all across the country. In fact, there's been 19,000 arrests by the FBI nationwide. That's more than double last year in the same time period. Of those, 1,600 arrests were for violent crimes against children. 4,000 child victims have been rescued by this FBI under this current leadership. 1,000 arrests from investigations of foreign terrorist organizations. There's been 1,500 kilos of fentanyl seized. 6,300 kilos of meth have been seized, and 3 of the top 10 most wanted have been arrested so far. Not a single one of the individuals on the top 10 most wanted list were arrested under the previous administration. We've arrested 3 in 7 months. So when you're actually working and enforcing law and order, you need all hands on deck. And so we look forward to welcoming Andrew Bailey to this new post.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, New York Times, writing about this. Mr. Trump once briefly considered nominating Mr. Bailey to be the Attorney General, and during the transition discussed selecting him to be the FBI director. But the president, who likes aggressive personalities, found him too laid back and somewhat lackluster, according to people briefed on the meetings at the time. Article goes on, it remains to be seen what Mr. Bailey's hiring means for Mr. Bongino, whose future has appeared tenuous after a furious fight with the Attorney General Pam Bondi spilled into public view in July. He and Ms. Bondi had an angry confrontation in the White House in front of top aides over unreleased files in the case of disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein, and over whether Mr. Bongino was leaking information to the news media. That was from the New York Times. This is Washington Today. Bloomberg News writes that California Republican state lawmakers asked the state's top court to block Governor Gavin Newsom's redistricting plan in an emergency petition. Newsom, a Democrat, is flouting the public's right to have 30 days to comment on proposed legislation, and the court must pause the process by Wednesday, the petition said. Newsom is pushing for a statewide vote to approve congressional maps that would likely help Democrats gain 5 seats in the 2026 elections, offsetting potential Republican gains in a round of redistricting in Texas, backed by President Donald Trump, a Republican. Several measures that would call for the election were scheduled for its first committee hearings Tuesday morning as lawmakers rushed to approve the plan ahead of a Friday deadline. Republican lawmakers are trying to stall votes, but with Democrats holding supermajorities in both the state Senate and Assembly, the GOP has limited options for countering the plan inside the state capitol. That was from Bloomberg Law. One of the hearings was before the California Senate Elections and Constitutional Amendments Committee. Sabrina Cervantes, a Democrat, is the chair.
If California does not push back against President Trump's attacks to rig our elections through partisan gerrymandering in states like Texas, we risk losing one of the most fundamental pillars of our system, the right of every community to fair representation. Unlike Governor Abbott, California will not bend the knee to authoritarian demands. We will not allow red states to strip seats in Congress, and we will not stand silent while the communities we represent are robbed of their voices. Let me be clear. California is not acting unilaterally. This legislative package is a response, a safeguard. Only if Texas and other states move first to withdraw their maps for partisanship gain. Now, I know some will raise the question of whether these maps should be drawn now or later. That debate has been at the center of discussion for the past month. Here's the reality. There is only one responsible way to do redistricting in this moment, and that is to be fully transparent with the people of California. Unlike other states, we have put these maps on public display for everyone to see, months before the election. Voters will have the chance to review them and ultimately decide at the ballot box whether they should be used if Texas and other states follow the president's demands for more seats. This is the most transparent process in the nation. Drawing maps later, after the election, would mean little to no transparency and no direct voter approval. Let me be clear. Drawing maps later simply does not work with the election calendar. Anyone suggesting otherwise either hasn't looked at the deadlines or isn't being honest. Do we really want to delay the June primaries to September? Do we really want voters not knowing their candidate options? Our responsibility is to ensure that California stands as a firewall against the abuse of power. At the end of the day, our system of government is only as strong as our willingness to defend it. And today, that defense depends on us.
California Senator Sabrina Cervantes, a Democrat, chair of the Elections and Constitutional Amendments Committee at today's hearing in Sacramento. California uses an independent redistricting commission to draw its U.S. House maps. So the proposal from the Democrats would ask the voters in a special election this November for a mid-decade redrawing of those maps. The committee's vice chair, Stephen Choi, Republican, opposes this plan.
61.3% vote approved of the commission. So I have a total trust on the election redistricting commission, and 10-year cycle comes very quickly, and the preparation for that, and then also the whole process of hearing the citizens' input into the process before the final map has been drawn. It takes a lot of time, but this one is just for next 3 election cycles. In reaction as a retaliatory reaction to other states which you are condemning, and if you follow the same condemnable actions, then Californians should be condemned by other people. Why should we follow that same suit and we destroy our good model that we have chosen? You are talking about the defending the democracy. Which side is a better action to defend the fair election redistricting that has been fairly and approved by citizens, and that cycle is going to be only applied next 3 election cycles. So who can guarantee that?
California Senator Stephen Choi, Republican, vice chair of the Elections and Constitutional Amendments Committee at today's hearing. The California State Assembly Committee on Elections also held a hearing on the proposal, and you can find the full video of both at our website at cspan.org. There's a story from The Hill. U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, slammed California Democrats' proposed House map on Monday, saying he's taking measures to stop the new congressional lines from advancing. He wrote in a statement on X, Democrats across the nation have played politics with redistricting for decades, and this is just the latest example. Republicans who are following state and federal laws will not be lectured by people who abused the system. I've instructed the NRCC to use every measure and resource possible to fight the California Democrats' illegal power grab, referring to the House Republicans' campaign arm. I will continue to lead efforts to defend our House Republican incumbents and grow our majority so that we can continue to deliver on our common sense America First agenda. Statement from Speaker Mike Johnson as reported by The Hill. Story from Associated Press, a Texas Democrat opted to stay in the State House chamber overnight and into Tuesday rather than allow a law enforcement officer to shadow her while Republicans try to prevent further delays in redrawing congressional maps that President Donald Trump wants. In Texas, Democrats staged a 2-week walkout to prevent a vote on the new maps, and the Republican House Speaker said those who return Monday would have around-the-clock surveillance by State Department of Public Safety officers to ensure they would return to the Capitol. Democrats had to sign what they call permission slips, agreeing to the surveillance to leave the floor. Nicole Collier was interviewed on CBS Austin this morning.
Since the session adjourned yesterday, a little bit after 12, I have been on this House floor because I refuse to sign a piece of paper that it's humiliating and it's also offensive. So I've been sitting here, and my colleague, the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, Jean Wu, has joined me, and Vincent Perez, another colleague of mine from El Paso, joined me. And, I've been here on the floor. I haven't moved since then because I believe that what is going on is just wrong. It's completely wrong, and we've got to stop treating people like they are less than. I mean, we need to see Texas trust the voters to elect the candidate of their choice. We don't need them to choose who their voters are.
It's been a contentious time in our Texas Capitol, and at the center of this debate is this redistricting battle that we've seen play out in the first special session, now the second one. But now that quorum has been met, we are seeing the continuation of redistricting hearings, and this battle is now playing out across the country. What message are you sending out to voters, lawmakers, along with your Texas House Democrats right now?
I'm saying to stand strong, stand up against those bullies who try to push you around. You don't have to take it. You have the right to peacefully protest under the law. We have to be able to exercise our First Amendment right. We saw this chamber decide that rigging our maps was more important than providing flood relief. And so when you see government taking action that you oppose, you have a right to object. And that's what I'm doing. I am challenging government's decisions that don't put our people first.
Texas State Representative Nicole Collier, a Democrat, speaking in the House chamber in Austin, Texas, interviewed by the local CBS affiliate TV station. The Republican-controlled Texas House of Representatives has scheduled a vote on the new congressional district maps for Wednesday, and Governor Greg Abbott, a Republican, telling Fox News on Monday that new map will pass the State House and then the Senate, and it'll sign into law, maybe before the week is out.
Most of Americans were unaware how these blue states had gerrymandered their states so much. It's so ironic that these Texas Democrat House members went to Illinois, which is one of the most gerrymandered states in the entire country. And when you look at California, Illinois, Massachusetts, New York, they've squeezed out all Republicans they can possibly squeeze out. What Texas is doing, we're just drawing fair maps as allowed by law, and it will ensure that at least 5 more members of Republicans will be serving in the United States Congress. Let me add to what you showed on the agenda earlier, because the Democrats did return to the Texas Capitol, to the state of Texas this morning, and then hours later, the House committee already passed those maps out, and those congressional maps are going to pass out on the House floor on Wednesday. They've already passed out of the Senate. They will become law probably by the end of this week.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott, a Republican, on Fox News on Monday. The Texas House Minority Leader Gene Wu said Democrats would challenge the new maps in court. Story from the Indiana Capitol Chronicle. Indiana's entire House GOP congressional delegation pledged support Monday for President Donald Trump's plan to craft new federal district maps in an attempt to pick up 1 or 2 additional Republican seats in 2026. The push comes after national Republicans, including President Trump, have pressured red states to reconfigure their maps ahead of 2026 to maximize GOP control in the U.S. House. Indiana was launched to the forefront of that conversation following recent meetings between Vice President J.D. Vance and top state leaders. Governor Mike Braun reiterated Monday afternoon that he remains non-committal on whether to call a special session for redistricting, saying the decision will depend on consensus within the General Assembly. That was from the Indiana Capitol Chronicle. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Past president, why are you doing this? This is outrageous.
This is a kangaroo court.
This fall, C-SPAN presents a rare moment of unity, Ceasefire, where the shouting stops and the conversation begins. Join Political Playbook Chief Correspondent and White House Bureau Chief Dasha Burns as host of Ceasefire, bringing 2 leaders from opposite sides of the aisle into a dialogue to find common ground. Ceasefire, this fall on the network that doesn't take sides, only on C-SPAN.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Moscow Times writes that Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Tuesday that President Vladimir Putin was open to meeting Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, but stressed that preparations for high-level summits take time, even as European leaders indicated the talks are expected to take place within the next 2 weeks. We're not refusing any kind of work format, neither bilateral nor trilateral. The president, Putin, has said that repeatedly, Lavrov told state broadcaster Rossiya 24. After U.S. President Donald Trump announced the day before the preparations were underway for a meeting between Zelensky and Putin, Trump said a trilateral session, including himself, would take place later That was from the Moscow Times. President Trump spoke about his effort to set up these meetings in an interview this morning on Fox News. He pivoted to that in his answer after being asked about whether U.S. troops could be sent to Ukraine as part of security guarantees that Western countries are promising as part of any peace deal to end the war between Ukraine and Russia.
What kind of assurances do you feel like you have that going forward and, past this Trump administration, it won't be American boots on the ground defending that border?
Well, you have my assurance, I'm president, and I'm just trying to stop people from being killed, Charlie. Look, they're losing from 5,000 to 7,000 people a week in that ridiculous war that should have never happened. If we had a normal president, not even a great president, if we had a normal president, it wouldn't have happened. But we had a guy that didn't have a clue. And they're losing, think of it, 5,000 to 7,000 a week. So even these guys, they'll say, okay, let's meet next week. I say, you can't meet next week. Next week, you're going to have 7,000 more dead people. You can't do that. You got to get this thing done. One of the things at the table was one of the gentlemen, who's a great guy, but he said, I hope I didn't insult him. He said, well, let's meet in another month or two, and let's see if we can start, making some. I said, a month or two? You're going to have another 40,000 people dead in a month or two. You have to do it tonight. And I did, actually. I called President Putin, and we're trying to work out a meeting with President Zelensky. We'll see what happens there. And then if it works out, then I'll go to the trilat and close it up.
President Donald Trump in a Fox News interview this morning, he also said that U.S. military air assets might be part of security guarantees for Ukraine. New York Times writing that Yuri V. Ushakov, the Kremlin's foreign policy aide, said after Monday's White House talks that Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin had a call in which they discussed exploring opportunities to bring more senior officials from both Ukraine and Russia into these direct talks. He made no mention of whether Mr. Putin himself would participate. Mr. Ushkov's comments, published by the Kremlin, suggested that Russia was offering these talks with more senior officials as the next step in the peace process. That was from the New York Times. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt opened her White House briefing today, calling what has happened over the past few days, President Trump meeting with President Putin in Alaska, and then Ukraine's president and the European leaders coming to the White House yesterday, a great success. She then spent a few minutes criticizing media coverage.
While previous presidents have traveled halfway around the world to apologize for America, President Trump stands up for America, and he has firmly restored America's status as the undisputed leader of the free world. However, one thing that has absolutely not changed is the media's negative and downright false coverage of President Trump and his foreign policy accomplishments. From the beginning of this entire process, much of the left-wing media has been actively rooting against the President of the United States in the pursuit of peace. Initially, the media ridiculously claimed that President Trump was somehow beholden to Russia for even agreeing to have a face-to-face discussion with President Putin inside of the United States. The media said President Trump was making a grave mistake by, quote, legitimizing Putin. They were aghast that President Trump would treat another world leader like a world leader. The media relentlessly attacked President Trump and claimed he suffered a, quote, major defeat for not immediately emerging with a final agreement, even though he said heading into that meeting, this was a meeting to listen and to understand how to move the ball forward. All weekend following those historic U.S.-Russia bilateral talks, we listened to clueless pundits on television trying but failing to claim that the president had failed. The so-called experts in the foreign policy establishment, whose record is nothing but endless wars, trillions of wasted taxpayer dollars, and dead Americans, have the nerve to try and lecture President Trump, who has solved 7 global conflicts in 7 months, about peace. This is the same president, by the way, who brokered the Abraham Accords in his first term, on top of more than half a dozen other peace deals this year alone, as I just said. We also saw yesterday the president of Ukraine and all of the other major leaders of Europe fly across the Atlantic Ocean to meet President Trump at the White House because of the progress that was made, and that, if you ask the media, failed meeting, but it was not. It was highly productive and it was successful. This is why Americans' trust in the mass media is at a lowest point in more than 5 decades. Diplomacy is a delicate process, and instead of reporting the facts about what is happening here at this White House and what is happening between this president and other leaders around the world, many outlets in this room continue to try to actively undermine the president and sabotage the efforts towards peace. That is why I felt the need to set the record straight.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, part of her opening statement at today's news conference. We covered the entire news conference on C-SPAN. You can find the video at cspan.org. BBC News writes that Sir Keir Starmer has called U.S. President Donald Trump's commitment to security guarantees for Ukraine a breakthrough, as he hailed the movement toward a meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. The Prime Minister joined the Leaders' Summit at the White House on Monday, having cut short his family holiday in Scotland. From what Sir Keir said overnight, it seems he believes that small sacrifice was well worth it. He co-chaired a virtual meeting of European and Commonwealth allies, the Coalition of the Willing, on Tuesday to update leaders and to discuss next steps. Following the meeting, a Downing Street spokesperson said the Prime Minister had outlined plans for the coalition and U.S. counterparts to meet in the coming days, prepare for the deployment of a reassurance force if hostilities were to end. Leaders also discussed how further pressure could be placed on Putin, including through sanctions. That was on BBC News. Prime Minister Starmer posted a video today that was apparently recorded late Monday in Washington.
Back at the British Embassy now after a long day, but a good day and a productive day, because both of the outcomes that we, the United Kingdom, most wanted, we've moved forward in a material way. And there was a real sense of unity between the European leaders that were here today and President Trump and President Zelensky. And 2 big outcomes, a breakthrough when it comes to security guarantees, with now the Coalition of the Willing countries, that's the 30 or so countries that we've been coordinating for some months on security guarantees, now working with the US at pace to work up those security guarantees. These guarantees will ensure that if there is a peace, if there is a deal, then we hold to it and there isn't further conflict. So really important for Ukraine, really important for Europe, and really important for the United Kingdom as well. That's why it was an outcome we really wanted to achieve today. The second is that there will now be a bilateral meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky after a phone call by President Trump during the course of this afternoon to President Putin, followed by a trilateral meeting with President Trump as well. Now that's really important because it's a real recognition of the principle that no decisions about Ukraine can be taken without Ukraine. Ukraine must be at the table. So whether it's territorial issues, whether it's prisoners, whether it's the missing children, a really important step forward there. Now, these were both the outcomes that we planned for and wanted from today. Because there was that sense of unity, we were able to make real progress.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer posting that video today on X, apparently recorded yesterday in Washington. Story from The Guardian. Israel has said it will deliver its response to international mediators by Friday over a new Gaza ceasefire plan accepted by Hamas amid mounting pressure for a truce in a war that has claimed more than 62,000 Palestinian lives. After mass protests in Israel demanding a deal to secure the release of the remaining 20 living Israeli hostages held in Gaza, it appeared that Hamas had reduced its demands over a prisoners for hostages exchange, as well as over the scope of an Israeli demanded security buffer zone. Under reported details of the plan, about half of the remaining living hostages, as well as bodies, would be released in a phased deal in exchange for about 150 Palestinians held in Israeli jails, some serving life sentences during an envisioned 60-day ceasefire. That from The Guardian. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked about this today at her briefing.
There was a ceasefire proposal put forward by both Qatar and Egypt. Hamas accepted it on Monday. Israel has yet to officially weigh in. I'm wondering if the U.S. was at all involved in it, if it's supportive of it, and whether or not the president believes Israel should accept it.
I don't think it's a coincidence that Hamas accepted this proposal after the President of the United States posted a very strong statement about this conflict on Truth Social yesterday. I would refer you back to that statement. As for this proposal that Hamas has now accepted, the United States continues to discuss it, and I'll let the President weigh in on it definitively.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt at her news conference. Again, from the Guardian article, Qatar's foreign ministry spokesperson said on Tuesday that the latest Gaza ceasefire proposal agreed by Hamas was almost identical to an earlier plan put forward by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Hamas had given a very positive response, and it truly was almost identical to what the Israeli side had previously agreed to, the spokesperson said. This is Washington today. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick begins a CNBC article said Tuesday that Intel must give the U.S. government an equity stake in the company in return for CHIPS Act funds. Shares of the struggling chip maker climbed 8% on Tuesday, continuing to rally on recent reports that the Trump administration is weighing different ways to get involved with the company. Bloomberg reported Monday the White House was discussing a 10% stake in Intel in a deal that could see the U.S. government become the chip maker's largest shareholder. That was from CNBC, where Secretary Lutnick was interviewed this morning, explaining the rationale for this position was both to get the most out of taxpayer money and to safeguard U.S. national security.
For national security, we need to make our own chips here. We cannot rely on Taiwan, which is 9,500 miles away from us and only 80 miles from China. So you can't have 99% of leading-edge chips made in Taiwan. We want to make them here. So that's a key part of our initiative. That's part of the deal we did with Japan. That's part of the deal we did with Korea, to have the infrastructure and economic capacity to build those chips in America. And of course, one of those pieces is it would be lovely to have Intel be capable of making a U.S. node or a U.S. transistor, driving that in America. That would be lovely. That's not necessary. But as I said, that would be a really good thing to have, would be American participant in the semiconductor space.
So, Mr. Secretary, how do you view then the CHIPS Act funds that have yet to be committed but have been promised, and the idea that that might be then converted to an equity stake? Is that how we should view it, that ultimately that's what you're talking to Intel about right now?
Yes. I mean, the president figures out that America should get the benefit of the bargain. I mean, that is exactly Donald Trump's perspective, which is, why are we giving a company worth $100 billion this kind of money? What is in it for the American taxpayer? And the answer Donald Trump has is, we should get an equity stake for our money. So we'll deliver the money, which was already committed under the Biden administration. We'll get equity in return for it, get a good return for the American taxpayer, instead of just giving grants away. Donald Trump views we should get benefits for the economics that we put out.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick on CNBC this morning. More from the CNBC article. Lutnick said any potential arrangement would not provide the government with voting or governance rights in Intel. Lutnick also suggested that President Donald Trump could seek out similar deals with other CHIPS recipients. Intel said last fall that it had finalized a nearly $8 billion grant from the law to build its factories. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, was awarded $6.6 billion under the legislation to boost chip fabrication at its Arizona facilities. That was from CNBC. From Reuters, the leader of Canada's official opposition Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre, secured a return to Parliament and a chance to grill Prime Minister Mark Carney, staging a comeback after unexpectedly losing his seat in an April election. Poilievre won 80.4% of the vote in a special election on Monday in the parliamentary constituency of Battle River Crowfoot in the province of Alberta, a Conservative stronghold. The sitting legislator stepped down to allow Poilievre to run in his seat, thereby allowing him to return to the House of Commons. That was from Reuters. Pierre Poilievre spoke in his victory speech Monday night about trade and tariffs and relations with the U.S. and with China.
Most of all, we need to restore the sovereignty of our country. Our nation has become far too dependent on one export market, and increasingly the Liberals are losing two trade wars, one with China and one with the U.S. Since Mr. Carney took office, $60 billion of net investment has fled the country, to escape high liberal taxes and brutal anti-development policies. This has weakened our economy and our negotiating position against other countries that want to take advantage of us. Those investors are taking their money to other places that have lower taxes and more favorable treatment. Meanwhile, U.S. and Chinese tariffs have actually worsened since Mr. Carney got elected, and that was an election that he ran on getting a better deal. Conservatives will fight to put Canada first, and we will work with anyone from any party. We continue to extend our hand to Mr. Carney and say that we want to work with any party to put an end to the tariffs and get a fair deal for Canada. In fact, we're proposing solutions, nonpartisan solutions that will help strengthen Canada's hand. For example, we propose a Canadian Sovereignty Act to take back control of our economic destiny. This act would legalize pipeline construction, rapid mine approvals, LNG plants, nuclear plants. It would get rid of the industrial carbon tax, the EV mandate. It would ensure that Alberta could continue increasing its output of oil and gas. It would pave the way to get pipelines built right across this country, and it would eliminate capital gains tax when you reinvest your profits here in Canada to bring back hundreds of billions of dollars investment. This is an idea I hope the Liberals will steal, because our purpose is Canada.
Pierre Poilievre giving a victory speech in Alberta Monday night after winning a special election, or as they say in Canada, a by-election, allowing him to return to Parliament as Canadian opposition leader. He lost his seat back in the April election in the Ottawa area, but another Conservative member stepped down, setting up the special election and allowing him to come back. U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is scheduled to speak at the Fed's annual gathering of central bankers in Jackson Hole, Wyoming on Friday. The story from Quartz. When Powell took the stage at the 2024 Jackson Hole Economic Policy Summit, he signaled that rate cuts were on their way. This year, it may not be so simple. The Federal Reserve Chair faces pressure on all fronts. On one side, the recent jobs report that revealed a slump in hiring, fueling calls for a cut. On the other, a sharp spike in wholesale prices, fueling fresh concern about tariff-led inflation. Then there is President Donald Trump, who has called him a major loser and a total stiff for not cutting rates, and has floated the idea of trying to fire the central bank chief on several occasions. That was the article from Quartz. The Fed chair's term as chair runs out next May. President Trump has already made it clear that he'll be nominating a new chair. Today, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on CNBC that the interview process will be starting soon.
In terms of the interview process, we've announced 11 very strong candidates. I'm going to be meeting with them probably right before, right after Labor Day, and to start bringing down the list to present to President Trump. And it's an incredible group. It's people who are at the Fed now, have been at the Fed and private sector. So I'm looking forward to meeting all of them with a very open mind.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on CNBC. Wall Street today, the Dow up 10, S&P down 37, NASDAQ down 314. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have both posted videos this week of what they're calling the Pete and Bobby Challenge. And that is do 100 push-ups and 50 pull-ups within 10 minutes. They say the best can do it in 5 minutes. Here's the video today on Secretary Kennedy's X feed.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 3.
Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your HHS Secretary. I'm here with Secretary Hegseth from the Department of Defense. And we had our big Pete and Bobby challenge today. 50 pull-ups, 100 push-ups. You try to get under 5 minutes. How'd you do?
We got close. I was about 5:25. You were right behind me.
We had a couple of Marines here.
One beat 3 minutes, a couple beat 4 minutes. Yeah. Pretty impressive.
It was President Trump who inspired us to do this. This is the beginning of our tour, challenging Americans to get back in shape, eat better, but also you need to get out and exercise. And we have a challenge. There's another cabinet member who we hope would show up today. We told them there was a cabinet meeting here. But anyway, we want to send out a challenge to Sean Duffy to come and do this.
So, Secretary Duffy, you're invited to do the Pete and Bobby challenge. Can you do it in under 5 minutes? 50 pull-ups, 100 push-ups. What do you think?
You can beat 6 minutes. You can be part of this.
And yes, thank you, President Trump, for setting the example. Presidential physical fitness, make America healthy again. Fit, not fat. We're going to have a war-fighting force with young men and women who are prepared to defend the nation. We're doing it as a team. Join us. Appreciate you. Absolutely.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth joining Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in a video on their Pete and Bobby challenge. Story from ABC News. The draft of an upcoming government report suggesting ways to improve the health of American children does not recommend severe restrictions on pesticides and ultra-processed foods, according to a copy of the document obtained by ABC News. The draft's language, if left unchanged, would constitute a win for the agriculture industry and a potential setback for Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his Make America Healthy Again MAHA allies, who have railed against the use of chemical additives in America's food supply, arguing that they harm children. That was from ABC News. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.